we have 3 presentations today in this session, and without further ado, we will start with Rouven.
Yes.
And you will speak about how to prepare teaching staff for continuing education for professionals.
So you want to, it's like 15 minutes max, right, for the presentation, 15 minutes worth of discussion.
Yeah, that was our original idea, so we can go that way.
Yes, okay, I'm going to try and share my screen now.
Yes, please.
Ta-da. So just checking, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, so well then off we go. So well, thank you for having me, or rather us, because we're here with an entire team. So my name is Rouven Hagemeijer, and I'm employed by the Department of Onderwijs, Advies en Training, as we call it in Dutch, which is part of the School of Social Sciences of Utrecht University. And I will be talking about how to prepare teaching staff for continuing education for professionals. So, quick overview. So our team consists of Hanne, Lisbeth, Caroline, Karin, Ineke, and yours truly. And in English, we refer to ourselves as Educational Development and Training, although we're by no means internationally oriented. So you probably won't come across us unless you are living in this wonderful country of ours. Oh. Yes, so I have a very simple program for you today. I'm going to talk about the why, the what, and the how of professional education. Then there is hopefully some time and some space to do a discussion and exchange of ideas, and then I'll wrap up. So very straightforward. Well, just to make sure that everyone is approximately on the same page, seeing that we're probably from different backgrounds. So when you talk about the need for continuous professional education or continuing education, lifelong learning, and so on, I mean, the need for continuing one's education is brought about by pressures, societal pressures, economic pressures, other pressures, and necessitates us to continue educating ourselves after completing our traditional education, which means bachelor degree, master's degree. And the main reason in general, especially in the literature when you explore the phenomenon, is that you need to keep educating yourself, developing yourself, you need to keep learning and acquiring new skills and bodies of knowledge, because you need to remain employable, which means that your employer will either choose to retain your services, or alternatively, you will be able to find employment elsewhere, either within your particular field or perhaps slightly adjacent to it, depending on the development that the market requires of you. Like I said, there are many different terms that we use to refer to that: continuing education, lifelong learning, and so on, but it's in general more or less about the same thing, the same phenomenon. And there tends to be, whenever we talk about continuing education or continuing professional education, there's an implicit focus on professionals, which is also something that was raised during the introduction today and in the keynote, I think. And one of the reasons that I'm here talking about this topic is that Utrecht University has made providing education to professionals a key focus for the coming years. So, like other universities, some universities already have a head start, especially when you look at the schools of management and business. They've been providing this type of service to professionals for decennia already. But now it has become a focus of my employer as well. So, and as part of that development, we, Educational Consultancy and Training, have been asked to develop the course that will support the lecturers employed by Utrecht University, who are either already providing education to professionals or want to start offering their services to professionals in the field with support. Because as again already was hinted at earlier on, the professional and his or her education has quite a unique nature, or it comes with specific requirements and needs that you really need to address if you start developing courses, master classes, whatever you want to call them. Sometimes it's just a matter of picking the right label to that target group. Now, although there are many different definitions of what a professional is, might be, we have chosen a very straightforward one, which I think covers most of the aspects that you can find in the literature, the most pressing, most important ones. So we define a professional as someone who works at a higher vocational or academic level. And it's always someone who is already active in his or her field. Just to make sure that we are on the same page. So we don't focus on the institutional aspects of what a profession might look like. So we don't distinguish between engineers on the one hand, or lawyers and people in the field of medicine on the other, because for our purpose, that's not as relevant. This one. So what then are the challenges, or what constitutes the unique nature of the professional that necessitates us to come up with a course that will help people who are used to teaching either bachelor or master students, to help them to prepare them for working with these people who are already active in their fields? Well, based on a piece of research that was carried out by people within our department in 2018, so it's quite relevant and quite recent still. There are three distinguishing characteristics that I want to focus on. There are actually more, but these are the three most important ones for my session. And Ineke Lam is currently discussing the other ones as well in her presentation. And Anne ten Berge will also in the afternoon go into that in more detail. But those three characteristics are people who are professionals and are already active in the field, already being employed and already working within that field, have gained experience and practical knowledge of their profession, which means on the job as they do it, which is of course different from most students that we have. Of course, sometimes you find people who are also already employed and working in, for instance, education or adjacent fields who enroll in master programs as part-time students, but that is different because they participate and partake in our regular forms of education. And they go through the same courses, take the same exams as regular students. But this group has already knowledge and experience. And I'm going to leave aside for the moment what then the difference might be between knowledge and experience, because that would take me way too long. Then a second characteristic is that they have a different motivation for learning, because they usually, or depending on their profession, they either want to expand their knowledge base, or it's part of the mandatory training and education that they need to go through in order to retain their registration or keep up to date their credentials, for instance, as lawyers, accountants. And consequently, and following from that, they also have their own individual learning goals and questions. And there's a difference between someone who has to participate in a particular course in order to be allowed to continue practicing their profession, and someone who really wants to, for instance, better their chances of furthering their career. So these three things are unique to what it means to work with professionals. And why is that important? Because, there we go. Those three characteristics combined lead to two specific dimensions or aspects that need to be addressed when you develop education that's meant for professionals. And those two aspects are customization and reciprocity. As you can see, customization refers to the fact that you need to meet the learning goals of the participants and take into account their motivation. Because if you work with regular students, it's easy to tell them, okay, no, you're here and you may not like everything that we ask you to do, but that's part of what you need to learn, and you don't know yet what it is that you need to learn because you haven't done it yet. For a professional, that's different. So they have a very specific goal, they have specific motivation, and you need to address that. Because the last thing you want is that someone signs up for a course and either is unsatisfied with the content, and they usually pay a lot of money for those courses as well, so that's an additional concern, of course, or because their motivation is not so much intrinsic as it is extrinsic, because they are being forced to take that course by their employer. Then you need to work with that, you need to be aware of that to make sure that they will not disrupt, for instance, your process, because that happens. And reciprocity is about the interaction, the two-way interaction between the lecturers of the course and the participants in the course. And the main focus is the need for incorporating the experience and the practical knowledge of the professionals into the course, because they're not a blank slate. They have already done it. They know what it's like in practice. They know what the pitfalls are. They know how you use particular skills in practice and how that could, perhaps even should in some cases, I can imagine, differ from what we tell them when people participate in the regular, more straightforward types of education. So you need to use that to some extent. They can, for instance, share it with the other participants so that they can learn from one another. But you can perhaps also use teaching methods that allows them to reflect on their own knowledge and their own experiences, so that they become more aware of why it is that they do what they do, so that they then perhaps can function in a different way, expand their repertoire and the like. So these two needs, or these two aspects, affect not only the learning activities that we use, how we work with them, but also how we involve them in the education, perhaps even to the extent that you talk about adjusting your learning goals, but also the structure of your education. So, and that's based on the idea that's in the literature known as active student participation, but because we're not dealing with students, but we're dealing with professionals, we decided to relabel it active participant participation, and also has a nice ring to it, APP, so that's great, I think. So that's in a nutshell why we're focusing on this particular issue, and also why we're trying to incorporate these two aspects. See if my slide can go back. Of course, I'm so used to Teams. Okay, we'll go to that one. And why we want to address those three characteristics. The thing is, and that's when we get to the part of the discussion of this session. We've done an extensive literature search, and we also have knowledge, of course, from our own practice as professionals, no pun intended, of what it's like to work with this particular group. But the literature tends not to explicitly focus on these challenges as such. So that is why I, or we, as a team, would like to hear your thoughts on those three aspects: incorporating experience, the learning goals, and the motivation, via a series of questions. And we're not going to do that the old-fashioned way, because this is 2021 and we're almost post-COVID. So we have all these great tools that you can use as well. I will share in a moment a Padlet link with you, which is kind of like a Mentimeter, but better, I think. And I want to ask you to go to the Padlet and then take about 5 minutes for each of these characteristics, or just for the ones that you feel most comfortable with or feel that you have the most knowledge on, to write down what your thoughts are, specifically what your experiences are with these three characteristics, how you might successfully integrate them into education, what learning activities one could use when working with professionals, perhaps a critical perspective. Maybe we're barking up the wrong tree, right? Maybe you have a different idea. and any other concerns that might come to mind. So about 5 minutes, then I want to take a look, or a collective look at the Padlet to see what stands out, if anything stands out, and see if there are any lessons learned. And then it's already time for the wrap-up, of course, and for the next session to start. So I'm going to stop sharing now. I've shared too much way already, I think. I'm going to go to the chat and post the link to the Padlet. And I would like to kindly invite you to go to that Padlet and then take about until 1:45 to, I was going to say write down, but type down your ideas to see what we can come up with. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the workings of the Padlet, you can just, start typing in the columns by clicking on the plus sign, and that should work just fine. And I'll give a shout out once it's 1:45. So just to summarize, we want to hear your thoughts on how to incorporate the experience and practical knowledge of professionals into the education you want to provide to them, how to go about dealing with their motivations for learning, and how to deal with their learning goals and questions that they might, could, perhaps, should have. Two more minutes, people. Keep it up. I'm seeing a lot of interesting ideas. Okay, it's 1:45, so feel free to finish typing up your thoughts before we take a look at the Padlet and perhaps discuss some of the more eye-catching ideas. So great, I'm going to see if I can share my screen so that we can all look at the Padlet. I just had to close the tab. I was planning on ordering my online groceries because you needn't know that, of course. So there it is. So a lot of interesting ideas, and I'm actually going to pick one or two just to see who added them, or just highlight them. But if anyone wants to just jump in or point out what they find to be interesting, by all means, because we're not pretending to have all the answers here. So I saw one that I really liked, and that's the organizing a story evening to share narratives in the group. So I think that to me that sounds as not just a good way of creating more of a group atmosphere, but also to a lowbrow way of sharing very insightful ideas and stories. So I really like that. One other idea that I saw that we already gave some thought to is the use of case studies. And I was just wondering, first of all, one of the people who wrote down the use of case studies, do you mean existing cases or case studies that are put forward and shared by the participants? Who would like to add to that? Because then my question would be, if you're going to use the cases that the participants can share with the others, what's the best way of framing that? Because traditional case studies are, of course, written up very elaborately.
Can I comment?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, it was not my remark, by the way. So
no, you're free to do so.
Yeah, sorry. My name is Joost Gekornik, work for TU Delft. So I'm also involved in organizing different courses. So like now climate change mitigation and room for the rivers. And this is also for professionals. We use a lot of case studies, but what I think, or but it's better to have your own case studies, because then you have the right materials, the right data, and it becomes less controversial. But I know that some participants are hesitant to share their case studies from their own company, because well, they would like a more neutral case study. But I'm happy for any other thoughts if people think different about this. So I find it easier to have my own case study with all the materials than just a case study which I don't know as a lecturer from a company. But maybe that's because I'm a bad lecturer.
I think that's a valid point, especially because it gives you the possibility of staying in control, of course, of what happens. Then the trick is perhaps to make sure that the cases match up with the experiences of the participants. Okay, great.
Yeah, the control is the most important.
Yeah, that's even the case when dealing with the bachelor students or master students, right? So control is very much an important aspect. Networking, yes, we thought of that as well. Flexibility, yes. The homogeneous group. Do we need a homogeneous group or not? Who has any thoughts on that? Maybe to wrap things up, because it's almost 10:02, and of course, the next presenter is probably anxious to go. But do you need homogeneous groups when working with professionals or not? And what would then be homogeneous to begin with? Who has any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that was my remark.
Okay.
Yeah,
you can address that as well.
Yeah, so but we have, for example, we have some leadership courses, but they're really focusing on a specific target group.
Mm-hmm.
So you may call it people beginning of the 30s, making their first step into management positions, started to reflect on more complex problems instead of complicated problems, these kind of things. So you could, I don't know whether you could consider them as a homogeneous group, maybe not, because they all come from different backgrounds. So in that sense, they are homogeneous, but their ambitions and inspirations are the same. So in that sense, I would call it a homogeneous group, but maybe, well, you can debate about that.
Okay, so you're looking for homogeneity on that side of the information, and not so
in terms
much
of ambitions and further career.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I can actually imagine that making things easier. Thank you. Well, unfortunately, it's 10 to 12, which means that it's time for me to shut up and thank you all for being here and sharing your thoughts. I will download the Padlet and I will send it to Timo so that he can then try and get it to you guys. Unfortunately, I have as I already told Timo, a course for professionals that needs to be taught in the afternoon. So I, very unprofessionally of me, have to leave. But I hope you enjoy the rest of the session. And again, thanks for taking the time to sharing.
Thanks, Rouven. It was very interesting, and I think a great start for our session. So now, off you go for teaching now then. Bye-bye. Okay, thanks for the presentation, and now we have luckily more people in than in the very beginning. And our next speaker is Boudewijn, and your topic is public-private partnerships in education, Erasmus Centers for Vocational Excellence. And do you have an activation for us in the end, or how did you plan to present?
Well, I've prepared a presentation for you all, but if we could make it more of a conversation rather than a presentation, I would be more than happy to. So please feel free to interrupt me or ask questions just during the presentation so we can have a conversation.
That's perfect.
And Timo, if you, because I'm not sure if I can see the raised hands while I'm presenting, so if you could help me with that, that would be much appreciated.
Sure, I'll do that.
Perfect, thank you. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me in this expert seminar. My name is Boudewijn Grievink, and I work for an organization called We Are Katapult. And this is a network organization of over 350 public-private partnerships in the Netherlands and across Europe. And what I would like to do in the next 15 minutes is share some of the experiences we have on how you can bring together companies, regional governments, and education providers in so-called skills ecosystems. And I will talk a little bit about the Centers of Vocational Excellence, which is a recently launched initiative by the European Commission, investing 400 million euros over the next 7 years into these public-private partnerships. But before I do, I would like to stress, although it's called Centers of Vocational Excellence, it is clearly a tool which is open for higher education institutions as well. So it's merely an instrument to organize the skills ecosystem in various regions and across Europe. And I would like to share some of the experiences we had so far in the pilot projects over the last 2 years. So I hope that's clear that even when I speak about vocational excellence, it's quite often, also beyond vocational excellence, it's more about the instrument of public-private partnership to create this collaboration between companies, schools, and governments. I will share my presentation now. Okay. So what I would like to do is, first talk a little bit about public-private partnerships and how they can help, shape the collaboration between education institutions and companies. I would like to share some of the impact and lessons learned from the public-private partnerships we have had so far, and then I will move on to the Centers of Vocational Excellence, and I will provide some concrete examples of how these centers work and what they can do for both students, companies, and educational institutions. Over the last 10 years in the Netherlands, there have been initiatives to stimulate public-private partnerships in both vocational education and professional education in the Netherlands. The Dutch government invested over 300 million euros in the last 10 years. And well, this has been co-funded by companies and regional governments as well to set up these collaborations to, well, for instance, develop the curriculum of courses, develop lifelong learning, do applied research, but also share facilities between companies and schools. Katapult is an organization, it's a non-profit that has been asked by the Ministries of Education, Economic Affairs and Social Affairs of the Netherlands to create a learning network. So we are an open source learning community of the 350 public-private partnerships in the Netherlands. So the project leaders of those projects are well joined together in our network. And on the map you see in the Netherlands, it's quite pink. Those are all dots of these public-private partnerships, but as you can see, we're spreading out across Europe as well through the Erasmus Centers of Vocational Excellence. If you look at the typical public-private partnership in our network, it includes about 35 companies, annually 400 to 600 students and about 50 teachers. And if you look at the numbers well across the Netherlands, you see about, well, 15,000 companies are involved in these partnerships. All vet schools and all universities of applied sciences are involved in, well, one of these initiatives, and also actually the universities are quite involved as well. They have different kinds of names, ranging from, well, digital workspaces, focusing on, well, collaborating with SMEs on digitalizing their work processes, so students can apply the latest insights from research into the processes of these SMEs. But we also have the field labs that are a bit more high-end, where companies are working together or on R&D, and also the lifelong learning of employees of organizations. About 85,000 students are involved in these public-private partnerships, and they cover all sectors in the Netherlands. So they range from health to high-tech to agriculture to the water sector. So you name it, and basically all sectors are covered. The way it works is quite often that we, as you can see on the screen, you have like a circle, which is the Center of Vocational Excellence. So you can see it here, that combines many other stakeholders in the region to collaborate on those topics. And through the Katapult network, these centers are, or the public-private partnerships are connected to each other to, well, share experiences. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel on the organizational part of these public-private partnerships. So when it comes to the organizational setup or the governance or like tax issues, those kind of issues we're trying to address through the network, so we can be as efficient as possible and really focus on making impact for the teachers, the students and the companies. If you look at the activities that we typically see in these public-private partnerships, and we are doing a biannual impact study, which can be found on our website, then you see that there's, well, 6 archetypical activities that you can see, and we call them building blocks. So quite often you see that these activities are combined. So there's a cluster of activities that focus on applied research, one on context-rich infrastructure. So an example of this is the sustainability factory in Dordrecht, near the port of Rotterdam, where the companies were basically saying, okay, well, it's all nice and good that students are trained by the schools, but by the time they graduate, we still have to train them for 2 more years because they haven't worked with the machinery and the software that we're actually using in the harbor. So what they've done in this public-private partnership is create this location where, during the daytime, the students are being trained on the work they will be doing in the harbor. And in the evening, this same location is used to retrain the professionals from those organizations. And the infrastructure that's being used ranges from all kinds of pipe systems so they can do like safety training, but also the latest welding technologies, for instance, are being taught to both the students and the employees. Two other other building blocks are the network building. So quite often we notice that there's a lot of knowledge available in a region, but that the stakeholders, so the companies and the schools, actually don't know each other very well. And what we're trying to do with these public-private partnerships is to have like a holistic approach and a more structural approach in this collaboration. So instead of just having incidental collaborations between companies and schools because of personal context, we're trying to push that up a level and take a more structural approach. So like for companies, there's like one clear platform or a one-stop shop, if you will, where they can put their questions, whether it has to do with improving education because they feel the curriculum is not up to date with the recent innovations in the profession, or if it's lifelong learning questions. So this network building is actually quite important to have the structural collaboration between the various stakeholders. And content-wise, the improving education, both in terms of content and also the way education is delivered. So, for instance, going out to the companies and actually experiencing what the work environment is like and working with real-life cases are examples of what's been done within these public-private partnerships. And it also closely relates to lifelong learning. And I will give some examples later on about how this co-creation of these lifelong learning courses is taking place in these public-private partnerships. And a final part, which is actually quite closely related to the lifelong learning, is the professional innovation of organizations. Especially in small and medium-sized enterprises, you see that since they are so small, it's quite hard for these organizations to just send off an employee for a complete course or take an entire training week, because it affects the day-to-day business of the organization too much. But still, by also getting students into the organizations, for instance, we are able to create this professional innovation, applying the latest insights from academia and research into the work processes of these SMEs. So for the larger organizations, it's quite often quite easy to participate in those lifelong learning activities, but for the SMEs, this is a bit harder. And this is actually something that's working quite well through these public-private partnerships, but it also means that it needs quite a tailor-made approach, actually. I see there was something mentioned in the chat, but it's not a question, so I will proceed. If you look at what Katapult is actually doing, we are offering a range of tools and sharing knowledge based on the experience of the 350 public-private partnerships. So on the right-hand side, you see a number of these tools, like a peer review, the stakeholder analysis that these public-private partnerships are doing quite often to get to know, okay, who is actually my skills ecosystem? Are there any blind spots of organizations that we are not in touch with, but could be valuable partners? And especially also looking at the needs of those partners. One of the main issues or challenges in the public-private partnerships is making companies and educational organizations understand each other. Quite often there's some images that the schools have about the companies and the companies about the schools. And with the stakeholder analysis, but also with the business model campus, we're facilitating the conversation between companies and the schools to see what the needs are for the companies to really make an impact and to address the issues that Rouven mentioned before already, as well as the keynote speaker in the plenary opening. And one other tool, which is actually quite popular or proved to be quite popular, is the decision tree that you see on the left-hand side. We basically took a lot of examples from the field and took the companies as a starting point, like, okay, what can you do with schools in order to satisfy your needs? So whether it's either recruitment or doing applied research or doing lifelong learning activities, this decision tree is really aimed at the SMEs and at the companies. So just to explain to them, like, okay, what can a school or a university of applied sciences, what can they do for you? And this again is trying trying to bridge the gap between in the dialogue between the schools and the companies. Well, if you look at what we're doing within the Katapult network itself, it's actually quite practical. It's quite hands-on. We are just bringing people together, creating this open source learning community. So it's really focused on peer-to-peer learning. So trying to not reinvent the wheel all the time, and just sharing the best practices, but more importantly, also the lessons learned. About 30% of all projects, public-private partnerships started over the last 10 years, didn't continue after all. So 66% did continue, which we consider quite a success, actually. But it's important to share those lessons. What went wrong, what kind of mistakes were made, and trying to prevent others to step into those same pitfalls. Basically, as an organization, Katapult is quite small, so we're only with 10 people facilitating and supporting all these public-private partnerships, but the real goal, so to say, is with the actual practitioners, so the project leaders in the public-private partnerships, the companies who have experienced, how it's like to work in a public-private partnership, share best practices of, successful lifelong learning courses, for instance, and share the success stories in that sense.
There's a question for you.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, do you see the chat, or shall I read it to you?
Well, you can read it to me, or the person that has asked the question can also come in. I will just stop sharing for a moment.
So it's about matching demand and supply.
Yeah, that's sorry. Good afternoon. That's good afternoon. Yeah. That is basically my question. So I know that teachers have the working load for teachers extremely high. So they consider, let's say, professional education as an additional burden, so to say. Some people experience it like that. So how do you match demand and supply? Do you have, for example, a group of allocated teachers who really focus on professional education, for example?
Yes. Well, what we see actually in all public-private partnerships is that on the one hand, there's always a project leader who stands with one foot in the educational world and with one foot in the company world. So you really need this matchmaker, because you're absolutely right that it takes a lot of time to establish these connections and to really pinpoint the needs of the companies and find what they truly want. And when it comes to the teachers, it's absolutely necessary to allocate specific time for this. It's not something that you do on top of your regular workload. So what we see in these public-private partnerships, that since it's on a structural basis, there quite often isn't a collaboration agreement, beyond the collaboration itself, stating how much time and how much input each partner is going to deliver. So this can be companies saying, okay, we're going to pay this amount of money, and for this kind of amount of money we would like to have these kind of lifelong learning courses, and so the schools can also allocate teachers for these kind of activities. But quite often, as you saw with the overview of the activities, it's a combination. So sometimes the companies are saying, okay, we're allocating a number of our professionals who will teach in the regular curriculum for the initial students to enrich the experience of the students, and vice versa. The university or the University of Applied Science will allocate teachers for the lifelong learning activities. But it's absolutely something that needs to be part of the business case, yeah, like I mentioned, you're absolutely right that this is taking a lot of effort. And if we look at the average development time, we see that it takes about 4 years before these public-private partnerships are in a mature phase where there's regular contact between the organizations, between the schools and the companies. So it's definitely something that needs a structural approach, and it's not to be done just at an ad hoc basis, I would say, because then it will probably be just one course, and then you have to start all over it. Does this answer your question? Okay, perfect. Are there any other questions at this point? If not, I will go back to the presentation again. So when looking at the public-private partnerships in
may I ask one short follow-up question?
Yeah, sure.
Now, you mentioned that it takes about 4 to 5 years to establish, let's say, an institutional framework. So in the meantime, how does the funding go? Did you get a lot of subsidy, or is that just wondering? The fact is, I'm also busy writing a policy document about lifelong learning for my faculty. I mean, that's for the autumn, but not for now. But
yeah,
so these are important for me. These are important notes for me to take into consideration. So I have to reflect. The first thing is, of course, how much do we have to invest in this?
Yeah. Well, what in the Netherlands, we had the regional investment fund for MBO, for instance, but also the centers of expertise for the universities of applied science. And what we notice in these activities is that the co-funding is one of the key success factors. So the government, or the Dutch government, is investing about 30% of the funding to these projects, but also the regional governments, the schools, and the companies will have to invest about 30% of the funding themselves as well. And when I say funding, this can also be in-kind contributions. But of the total budget, it's roughly 30%, 30%, 30%. And when I'm saying, okay, well, it takes about 4 years to develop this, I mean that it takes about 4 years to have like a sustainable collaboration that can work without the government funding. So you do start working on activities already in the first year, because quite often when you just make up a big plan and try to implement that, then the context has changed already in the meantime. So yeah, it's basically back to the drawing board. So that's why we basically say, okay, well, just start with some small activities first, and then we'll continue the conversation about the needs of the basically every stakeholder in the skills ecosystem, which can be focused on lifelong learning, but also on the applied research and the other activities I mentioned. So we recommend to start small, create some successes. From companies, we quite often hear that when impact has been made and they see the added value of the lifelong learning courses, for instance, then they are willing to invest themselves as well. So we have seen quite a few projects, for instance, in the north of the Netherlands, where the project started with project funding from the regional government and the national government. But at one point, the organizations were saying, okay, well, this is actually so successful and so beneficial to our organization that we're happy to chip in, both in-kind hours and funding to keep this initiative going and to keep this platform up and running. So then it was not dependent on the subsidy funding or the temporary funding from the government anymore. But it does take some time to reach that point, and this is also something we're seeing with centers of vocational excellence. These also have the European ones have a funding period of 4 years, and you really need that time to mature enough in your collaboration to keep this going, actually.
So is that how you finance yourself, with funding, governmental funding, or do you get the funding from the companies?
Well, the public-private partnerships are funded by both the schools, the companies, and the regional governments. So it quite often starts with like a regional vision on, okay, well, these are the topics that we want to work on, or these are the priorities, policy priorities for this region. So, for instance, in the south of the Netherlands, you have like a strong focus on chemistry, and basically all vet schools, University of Applied Sciences, the university, and the companies have said, okay, yes, this is something we want to focus on, and then all organizations are contributing to these public-private partnerships and to the activities that are co-created under this partnership. So there's no single funding, but really the co-funding from all parties involved.
And that's how you fund also your activities?
Well, the activities for Katapult itself, so the learning community is funded by the Dutch national government, by the Ministry of Education, Economic Affairs, Social Affairs, and actually also the European Commission. Now we're working on the European Centers of Vocational Excellence as well. But it's really just a small budget if you compare to what, well, the regional governments and the companies are contributing. So over the last 10 years, it was like 300 million invested in these public-private partnerships, and that really went into the activities at the schools and at the companies in the regions.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, I will go back to the presentation again. Well, I've actually mentioned quite a few of the topics on this slide about the lessons learned. I think it's, well, very important to work needs-based. So really focus on the impact well, your students or the companies will experience. Quite often we see like the number of or the intake in the sector is a big issue. So there's a lack of well-trained professionals in a certain sector. So that's something where companies and schools work together. And if you well, manage to make impact on well, those kind of issues, so actually increasing the number of students enrolling in your programs, or more graduates choosing for a career in that specific field, that's something that works stimulating for the companies to keep, well, continuing the activities with the universities, the University of Applied Sciences and the vet schools. Well, I've mentioned the co-ownership and the co-creation already. Actually, the co-creation is, in a recent example in Denmark, they developed a lifelong learning course on biodiversity for the largest urban greening company, together with the local school there. And on the one hand, it provides like more knowledge and transfers knowledge, well, from academia to the professionals working in the field. But at the same time, it also provides feedback on, for instance, the teaching methods. Because the company said, okay, well, it's all nice and good that you're developing this course for us, and they, but the main feedback they provided is like, okay, well, the people working for us are actually quite a lot on the road, so it's taking a lot of time for them to spend on working. So in the evenings, they are not too motivated to, well, start studying again. And actually, on some levels, the urban greeners like to work with their hands because, well, they don't read too well, actually. So the request from the company came, can you please make this an audio course? So these workers, when they are on the road going to clients, they could actually listen to the courses and brush up their knowledge on biodiversity. And for the teachers, that was a complete new insight, because they felt, okay, well, we never thought about this. And by these kind of exchanges, and they seem very small, but they have a huge impact on, well, whether or not the courses are being taken and whether or not employees are being motivated to actually take those courses. So it seems small, and it seems like a small adjustment, but in the end, it does make a big impact. Well, the last 2 points I've addressed already, but basically we recommend to just start working with the companies and start co-creating these activities, and engage with the companies to develop these activities, and then the exact structure or the exact MOU or well, collaboration agreement that usually follows. If you try to hammer out the governance first, you probably get bogged down in all kind of details without anything happening, apart from a lot of meetings. And so when you actually go out there, have cups of coffee with the companies about, okay, well, what do you need? How can we help you? And how can the companies help contribute, develop the curriculum, for instance? That is a pretty good start for these activities. And well, I've mentioned the 4 years period already. We tend to see these public-private partnerships as a relationship, and like in any good relation, take your time to get to know each other and, well, really be interested in each other's ambitions and motivations. Then a little something about the Centers of Vocational Excellence, and I'm wary of the time, so I won't play this movie, but I will share the slides later on so you can check it out. The European Commission has launched an initiative as part of the new Erasmus program called the European Centers of Vocational Excellence, which is basically aiming to, well, bring together the skills, regional skills ecosystems across Europe, bringing together the companies, regional governments, and schools in order to, well, work on the skills agenda, make sure that, well, the skills that the new professionals get are up to date and in line with the needs of, well, what companies, but society as a whole is asking of them. And they're doing so by, well, offering a budget of, well, 400 million for the next 7 years. So it's quite a bit of funding. And over the last 2 years, there have been, well, 12 pilot projects already, and I will share some of the experience in a little bit. Well, if you're looking for funding to well, basically start the activities in your skills ecosystem, this could be, well, an interesting opportunity to get some external funding. Well, you see the characteristics at the screen. And the things I would like to highlight is that the nice thing about these centers of vocational excellence is that it has a regional dimension and a European dimension. So if you look at the European platform of urban greening, one of the pilot projects, each region in the project basically has its own focus, focused on the needs of that specific region. So for instance, in Spain, drought is a big issue, so that's what they are focusing on. Whereas in the Netherlands, we well, are working on vertical gardening, having more rooftops, and innovations in, okay, well, how to do this technically and how to, well, maintain all those, well, vertical gardens. Whereas in Romania, for instance, like air quality is much more of an issue. So that there is differences between regions, but what the project basically does is that it allows the stakeholders in each region to focus on the regional needs, and where the regions can help each other, they will use the European dimension of the project to, well, share knowledge, exchange facilities. So it's actually quite a nice way to, well, get knowledge from other regions, and in the meantime, really develop your own region and the public-private partnerships in your own region. If you look at the types of activities in these centers of vocational excellence, it's basically anything that you can think of based on the needs of the region, actually. So if there's a strong need for, well, lifelong learning courses, for instance, then that's something you can focus on. But if, for instance, applied research or sharing facilities are, well, more in demand, then you can include that as well. On the slide, you see the 12 pilot projects. So if you like, you can, well, check them out later on. You see the websites there. It's basically covering all kinds of sectors at this point. So from the Netherlands, the European platform from urban greening and the POV water, platform of vocational excellence water, are headed by Dutch schools. But there's also some more well, transversal projects focusing on inclusion in education, for instance, like the GIVE project. And the Greenovet and the 3 LOE project are focusing on well, more transversal skills related to green skills and entrepreneurial skills in education. When we are looking at the European platform for urban greening as an example, that I think it's a nice concrete example of how we bring together the companies and the schools. With the climate change and the climate adaptation, we see that in order to keep cities livable, you just need much more greening in the city to well, work against heat stress. So, for instance, in the Netherlands, when you come to the Netherlands in 2 years' time to the eucen conference, you will see a large tower building, which will be completely green on the outside with well, vertical gardens and rooftop gardens. And these kind of initiatives you see more often to keep cities livable. And what this project does is basically saying, okay, well, we have these innovations, we have these developments going on, but what are the skills that the professionals need to well, maintain those buildings, to construct those buildings? And this is where the companies and the schools are working together. So, for instance, the urban greeners need to well, learn to upsell from buildings to maintain the buildings, for instance. but also when it comes to the high-end technologies in water catchment, or how to anchor or construct like these buildings. The companies are saying, okay, yes, we are going to do this, but we really need the latest innovations from the universities of applied science to be able to do this. And that's why this platform is created. So in the project, like on the top right, you see the logos of the organizations that are participating in this public-private partnership in the Netherlands. So that's one of the 6 regions. And it's a combination of both the companies, the local municipality, and the schools. So I think what is really nice in this project only started about 6 months ago, but it really integrates puts together the needs in the region to start developing the courses and the content of the program together. So this has to do with like knowledge transfer in terms of innovation, but also with the skills for the professionals. And for instance, the Ginkel Group, which is like the urban greening company, they're saying, okay, in comparison to 5 years ago, we have to work together with construction companies all of a sudden, and we need much more project management skills for our employees. And that's something that the schools will have to deliver. But also we are looking at, okay, should Welland College, who's providing the urban greeners, be the partner doing that, or do we need other schools to do that? So also the types of skills are actually changing quite rapidly, or the skills that are required. And through this platform, we are constantly in touch with the companies and the schools to ensure that we know what kind of skills are needed. I'd like to leave it at that for this moment, also because of time. I don't know if there is time for 1 or 2 last questions. Timo?
Yeah, maybe we could have 1 or 2 questions, and then a very short break before the last presentation. But go ahead if you have any comment or question.
And also, if you have any questions later on, please feel free to reach out to me later on. I would be more than happy to answer any questions or provide any specific examples if you like.
Exactly, and you have the video link you can maybe provide us.
Yeah.
Maybe I can ask a quick question. You had many tools there. Is there some single tool that is most popular, or something that is not that popular as you expected?
I think the 2 most popular tools are the network map, just making it visible who are all active in a specific region, in a specific field, just to know each other basically. And what we do is the network map is free to use, and anyone can put their contact details on there. So what we see is that both the companies and the schools are actually just providing the contact details so they can call each other. And this is already quite a big step, because companies quite often say, yes, I would like to do something with a school, but I have no clue where to start, who to call, or who to contact. So companies quite often say, yes, we like the schools, but they're so big that we don't know who to get in touch with. And the second tool, which is quite popular, is actually the business model canvas, which is a quite graphic and visual tool where you can develop the value proposition of your collaboration. So actually say, okay, what is it what we're gonna do? What is the added value that we're gonna deliver? And also look at, okay, what are the users that we are developing this activity for? Who are the main partners that we need? What are the key resources? But also, and this sometimes feels a bit strange, but also the cost structure and the revenue streams are included in this model. And we quite often get the response like, okay, but it's a business model. We're not a cookie factory, so why should we look at this? But in the end, if you are not looking at the cost structure and the way you are covering those costs, it's going to be really hard to have a sustainable activity, and also will continue that activity after the project period when like a subsidy ends. So we find this tool actually quite useful in just, well, creating more clarity on, well, what is needed for these public-private partnerships and the activities developed under this partnership.
Exactly. So in a way, quite simple tools are the most popular then.
Yeah, it's absolutely no rocket science, I have to say. It's
Any other questions? Maybe we can quickly get one. If no, so we thank you so much, Boudewijn, for your presentation.
You're welcome.
And then is the last bit of our session. But if you would like to just stand up for a moment to stretch your legs, that is perfectly fine to do do now, while I'm asking the next speakers to come up front. So we have Alexandra and Marie-Luise, and we will have a look at the learner. So focus on the learner and how learning experience approaches can be used in university continuing education. How would you like to activate the audience, just to let me know if we need to do something here in the background? What do you think, Alexandra?
We will have a Menti for you. So yes. We will have 2 questions for you, one at the beginning and one later on. So, but we will share that. So yeah, no additional work for you, Timo. Yeah. I'll put it in the chat. And we also have a how do you call that in English? Where you can take your phone and take a photo of the barcode, I think.
Super.
Okay.
So please go on.
Well, thank you so much, Timo. Marie and we applied to share our professional practice with you. Actually, we think we need to discuss this practical approach with you, since learning experience platforms are a new trend. And I think we have to build an opinion on how academic education is affected by this trend and how we can deal with the aspects of it. So I will have a quick look on the theory. Oops, one was too fast. I will explain you the differences between learning management system and learning experience system. And we picked the most important approaches for university continuing education. And Marie is going to present to you the second part, and she's going to explain you about our change process at Aalen University. And at the end, we would like to discuss future perspectives and hear a little bit more about your opinion as well. So this is the Menti. I also copied it to the chat. I hope everybody can see it. So we have a first question for you that you can answer right now, and we will resolve it in a couple of minutes. So you can take your mobile phone and it will directly lead you to the Menti. So
can I ask a question about the question that is on the Mentimeter?
Sure.
Because the question says, what learning management system does your university use with regards to continuing education or other forms of education given at the university?
I would say with regard to continuing education, since this is the topic we are talking.
If there's a difference, yeah. Most of the
There's
time
a
it's
difference,
the same, yeah.
I was hoping for that answer. Thank you.
Yeah. So I have some troubles right now with sharing the screen, unfortunately. I cannot move on. Oh. I'm sorry, I cannot. I don't know what happens, but I cannot continue with the screen at the moment, unfortunately.
Do you want to try to stop sharing and go back to sharing again, Alexandra?
Yeah, that
I
will
know,
probably
but
help.
now it's working. Sorry, I wasn't
Okay.
able to do anything.
Good.
Right now, so hopefully it's working. We'll see. Yeah, let me just give you a short introduction on learning experience platforms. So learning management system, all of you know, since we all use these systems since the late 90s. And nowadays, learning management systems empower e-learning. They are our basic tool for managing, documenting, tracking, reporting, or delivering our educational courses. And of course, they all serve our needs as educational institutions. And in comparison, learning experience platform put the learner in center to create a more personalized learning experience. But yeah, what does this actually mean? I still have problems with the sharing. Maybe Marie, I don't know if you can jump in and do the share. Ah, yeah, now it's working again, but I don't know what happens here at the moment. It's probably my, I have the computer and my iPad connected, so this might not work very well. Okay, I'll try to continue. Yeah, what is it actually? There are a lot of companies that use learning experience platforms to create a personalized learning environment for their employees, to promote their employee skills development beyond the mandatory compliance trainings. And LXPs accommodate actually any form of learning content. It could include like articles or podcasts, blogs, micro-learnings, videos, or courses from all kind of different sources. So LXPs are particularly suitable for micro-learning. This actually means that short learning units, users can learn exactly in between in short units what they really need. So LXP platforms are particularly suitable for companies that want to offer employees development and continuing education beyond their mandatory trainings, or they have to offer it due to the high qualification requirements. So learning from other peers is an important issue as well. So since learning experience system is particularly aimed at self-directed learning, it obviously requires a high level of self-learning skills and discipline from the learners. Oops, that was too quick now. Okay, so make it a little bit slower. We picked some functionalities that we think are important for you to know. There are a lot of features, and but let's start with one of the most interesting features. The most LXPs have extended user profiles, like you know from social media. They incorporate interests or your skills as categories. And those categories are interesting because they are the basis for further interaction. They can be tagged with courses and contents, and they also are the basis for interactions with other users. So second is personalization. Beyond known dashboards that we all know from our LMS, personal learning cockpits allow learners to design their learning environment themselves, decide, for example, which content and learning formats they want to add. They display your learning status, your learning success. And something that you should have heard of is XAPI, that is a new data exchange format. It is a standard that enables tracking and storing and sharing users' learning experience across different platforms and from multiple contents. So with the help of XAPI, you can track the learning activities and store this information in a so-called learning record store. So your learning path and contents can be tracked and made transparent. In general, LXPs show a stronger user interface and experience design. So some even present themselves in a Netflix-like interface with clear and simple search criteria. Yeah. Another thing everybody knows already is mobile learning, of course, but it is quite important to make it possible to switch between different mobile devices and continue learning exactly at the stage where you just finished this with your other device. Another major component is peer and social learning. So some LXPs even allow to add own learning materials and learning contents. And some LXPs also let teams segment themselves into own learning communities. So the system can recommend most popular content within that group. And obviously a key issue is content recommendation. It's very often skill or usage based. So a company wants you to prepare for a certain job. Or it can also be content or AI based that you all obviously know from online shopping or media streaming platform, that you will be recommended something that matches your profile. So just to go into a practical view, this was the theory part. I'd just like to show you some examples. I picked a few screenshots from commercial LMS providers, and to make it a little bit more tangible, we like to show you those screenshots to visualize some of the key features. Obviously, this example from a master plan has an appealing interface, a learning interface that learners have been used to through their media consumptions. And I'll like to show you this one from Velamis. It is a commercial LXP provider, and it has a typical look of personalized dashboards with the recommendations on top, and your personal learning path is underneath, upcoming events or your study summary, and so on. So this is quite typical look of a dashboard. Most of you might know LinkedIn. I think it is a good example for LXP functionalities. On top, you can see the personal pics for me, and underneath, you can see the skill recommendation due to my role as a managing director for continuing education. And obviously, I will also get recommendations for trends in higher education industries, since this is the industry I'm working in. And below, you can see the recommendations based on a tag, which is design thinking. This is a tag on within my profile. Well, next slide is the learning process, the progress of my learning. You can see I'm participating several courses, and there are saved courses. I have also a private collection and my learning history, and so on. So that was very, very quick theoretical and some practical information for you. But the interesting question for us right now is how do we bring these trends together with academic learning? What we see, I think, are global trends, like trends that we see in the EdTech or WebTech community, as well as in social media or user behavior. We all get used to recommendation. We all use sharing options. So we expect personalization. We expect courses to be made tailor-made for us. And some features like an appealing interface or the way we are traversing through those pages have become so natural for us that I think these trends are trends that we have to address in academic learning. But on the other hand side, we have the immovable pillars in academic education, like clear curriculum, we have compulsory course contents, we have huge comprehensive courses with mandatory workload. And obviously, we cannot let the learner decide what he wants to learn, because this is our competence. And I have the hypothesis that these trends will become a hygienic expectations of learners in continuing education. But how can we address this? This is our main question. I think there's some questions in the chat. Can we answer that later? Is that okay for you if we do the questions at the end?
I think that's perfect. Just leave some maybe 5 minutes in the end.
Okay, I will try to go quickly over it. It's again some troubles with this. Always when I change. Sorry, still having troubles with my different screens today. I'm so sorry. That was too quick. So this is my final slide, and we'll have some time for Marie. You have to hurry up, okay? Just to summarize what I've presented so far is. We have to think of a learning ecosystem for university continuing education. There are, I would say, the low-hanging fruits like mobile learning and an appealing user interface. This is something we can address easy and quickly. This is something we can easily achieve. I think we climbed that hill already, but there are a lot of other topics like content recommendation, personalization, and social and peer learning, where there is still a journey in front of us. And just to give you a few examples, right now we still have very little control of the quality of self-learning, but with the possibilities of documentation of self-learning in a learning record store, this gray area of academic learning could become more transparent. And then another example is a better personalization of dashboards to make the learning process more transparent for our continuing education. Students could be something to work on. And another option in the area of social and peer learning, I think a lot is done already, but peer reviewing competence seems to be a very important skill for the future, for future leaders, as well as the competence in digital collaboration seems to be mandatory for everyone. So there's a lot of topics I think we have to work on. So that was my practical presentation, and I'll give the screen to Marie to start with our use case in Aalen.
Yeah, you can just stop the screen sharing. I'll
you will show the
involve our mentee. Right, thank you. Yeah, I've seen most of you already have voted or joined the poll, so we can see here the results to your to the question which learning management system your university uses, and it is quite interesting to see that most of you are using Moodle. As I've seen, I think most of you are also in Europe, so that is I'll come back to this later. So Alexandra, I'll just share the presentation from here on.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much.
Right. So, well, where have we started off? We've in Aalen University, we also started off with Moodle as a learning platform system. we have thought about the same questions that we've just discussed. So for a future LMS, you will have to have certain criteria to move it forward to a possible LXP. So we looked at a lot of the trends and sorted those out. What functionalities are missing and what we envisioned for a future LMS. Therefore, we looked at different candidates like Brightspace, D2L, Blackboard, and Canvas with regard to the criteria that was important to us. Our decision was for Canvas and structure, and because Canvas was able to provide different options for these functions that we have deemed as important for us, and that also have further development possibilities in light of the changes from LMX to LXP. First of all, the main criteria was that we were looking for a platform as a service platform with the option for 24/7 service. Another important criteria was that it's cloud-based and version-free. Therefore, that was actually the second most important criteria for us. A possible customization for our university, and that the hosting management is external and not in the hands of the university. We were looking for a platform that is very user-friendly and is easy to navigate. And another important criteria for us was also a course sharing community, which Canvas offers. So back to the poll that we have seen. This is a bit an older chart that I've brought you, but I think it brings the main point. Well, next to the functions, the decision for Canvas was also based on the significant increase of the market share even before the COVID crisis. As a state university, it wasn't a very easy decision to choose a commercial provider, because the costs do play a critical role, as all of you know. And of course, in Europe, Moodle is still the leading LMS for state universities. I think private universities use quite often commercial providers, but I think it's just mostly a mindset thing for the state universities, because per our calculation, the annual license fees per user equal approximately the employment of one administrative person at the university. So actually it was quite an easy decision for us to make. So I brought you a few screenshots from our Canvas LMS, so you get a better feeling of the criteria that we deemed as important, and get some kind of look and feel of how we tried to implement these in our Canvas environment. Here you can see a dashboard. It's a classic dashboard. In the middle, you can see all the courses that the student is enrolled in. And on the right, you can see a to-do list and the recent feedbacks that you've gotten. It's quite a good overview. This is another view of the dashboard. You can just change your view as a student and maybe just see what your weekly plan looks like. I excuse for the slides. Most of them are in German. I tried to change most as possible in English so you can understand. But if you have any questions, just let me know. Yeah, this is an example for the individual learning paths here called mastery paths. We don't use this quite often yet. It has to be set up manually and by the lecturer, and it's dependent on predefined learning outcomes. This is an example for a math pretest in order to evaluate the knowledge base of a student dependent on their point status. They'll be able to access further learning materials according to the knowledge level. We have quite good experiences with this sort of mastery path, but of course it's just the beginning of what's possible. I've brought you another example of badges. It's in an external tool, it's an external plugin tool, and we use this for motivation of the learners and sort of gamification aspect. Students have to work through a predefined material and have to complete a quiz or an assignment. After handing in the task, they'll be able to access further chapters and granted a badge if they have absolved these chapters. And here they're able to monitor their progress and compare it to other course participants in this leaderboard. Another example is, of course, the mobile learning. We've talked about this before. Most of the LMS options have this option for mobile device learning, and it's just important so that anybody can continue learning on any device. Yeah, the last example is a social peer learning. I'll go over it quite quick. You can see here first of all, the students get the criteria for the feedback, and then a student can hand in their assignment and see also the peer review on the right-hand side. So after 2 years using the Canvas platform, what's our resume? First of all, taking responsibility for hosting the platform out of the university's hand was a very important criterion and turned out to be also a correct decision, especially due to the COVID crisis. We were very lucky and had no performance problems throughout the last year. The support for all the users has been used a lot during the first few months of full coverage. The lecturers were able to get support for minor problems, and I think for the first year, about 422 ticket cases have been solved successfully via different kind of tools like chat or web forum or the telephone also. We have regular status calls between the university admin and a customer success manager. Those have enabled continuous improvements in the system and adaptation to specific needs of the university. It was also possible to buy finished course templates, but the university has decided to design their own templates, which is also a nice flexibility in this platform. So the possible customization and the user-friendly design has been really a major plus in the acceptance during the migration from Moodle to Canvas. And in general, both teachers and students are relieved about the simplicity, especially their respective dashboards with their courses in focus contributes quite a lot to the teaching and learning environment, or to a good teaching and learning environment. With the current system, really many further functionalities would be possible, especially those that we have stated as good functionalities we would like to have in the LXP. And we would like to use those, but we're fighting against quite extreme limitations concerning data protection. One of you has already put this point out in the chat. So there are very strong restrictions within Europe and especially German regulations. And since the EdTech market is mainly in America, many rules really do come into force. And we have really seen that the overregulation hinders the progress in this area as well as the developments. So the focus should rather be on the freedom of choice of the individual users to allow certain functions. Yeah, we can discuss this point further also when we're done.
We are just about finishing the time, so.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
We're through already. Yeah, I think this is all you need to see. If you have any questions, just let us know.
Thanks, Marie and Alexandra. I think we need to stop the session now as we are almost 1 o'clock. But thank you for your presentation. I think you already answered the question about the data security. There was another question about micro-credentials, and I think you addressed that also.
Right, yeah. If you have any further questions, feel free to contact us via mail. I think the presentation will also be available for you, so you can see the final slides.
Sure. Just a quick question. How do you see that compared to the older version? Does it require the students more self-directed learner skills when they have so much more choices? Or is it very intuitive that people do it just naturally?
Well, the design should be intuitive. Sorry, Marie, but obviously you're right. Students need to have the skill to and the motivation to learn more self-directed. Marie.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's a mixture of both. You have to design the programs that the students go through it quite naturally. But on the other hand, the students do have to have more responsibility and take more responsibility in their learning progress.
That's true. Okay, I think we need to go back to the big room. So in the bottom right, you have the leave room function. So thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
And see you in the big room. Thanks.